recording, because it's always nice to not have the recording on while we're taking attendance and taking care of stuff. I would like to say, as one housekeeping announcement, though, to get started, we are talking advising. You are supposed to be advising with your advisors. And so for freshmen, first-year students, you are supposed to get your advising, your academic advising from the Career and Counseling Center on campus. And everybody's got an advisor that you are assigned to, and hopefully they've reached out to you to see if you can make an advising appointment with them. They're there to help you choose courses for next quarter that build upon the coursework that you started this quarter, that satisfy requirements for graduation, and that move you along to completing your degree. I want you to know some fun facts about the associate's degree here, that if you're taking 15 credits or more per quarter, you can finish this associate's degree in 2 years. If you're not quite taking 15 credits per quarter, for whatever reason, it's going to take you a little longer than 2 years to complete the degree, probably 2 years and 1 or 2 quarters of a third year to complete the degree. So some people are coming in here as A students from high school and may even have some high school college credit classes that they've taken, and they will complete this degree in 1 or 2 years, and that's fantastic. And others are kind of building a bunch of skills and helping to increase and perfect your academic skills, and so it might take some folks a little bit longer, but this is generally a 2-year degree. Sometimes it takes a little longer to complete the degree. I do advising academically for people who are visual arts majors, and so if you are a second-year student, sophomore here, who has has an interest in the visual arts, either in the fine arts or in design, I can be your advisor, and you can ask to have your advisor changed to me if you want to. I'm advising students during my office hour, so please look at my office hour Zoom link, which is on the main page of our classroom page in e-learning, and you can use that link to talk to me every day during the noon hour. I'm here from noon to 1 o'clock. Sometimes I get here a little late, so if it takes me until 5 or 7 minutes after noon to get here and get things turned on, please be patient. But I'm available to help people choose classes and try to get registered for classes for winter quarter. We're about to start registration for winter quarter, and you have to talk to your advisor, choose those classes for winter quarter, and get cleared by the advisor to allow you to go ahead and register. So you need that registration clearance from your advisor, and that's why we want you to have an advising meeting with your advisor so that you can choose the classes and get cleared for registration. Good morning, Donovan. Thanks for coming in. Okay, so I have opened up the share screen thing. If anybody would like to take the initiative and open up their own desktop and open up a project that you'd like to share with everybody, I will be very gentle. I'll be nice to the first person who shares something with the group. No criticism. I won't be mean. That's what you get for volunteering to share your first one. So please go ahead and unmute mics, if you want to be in that discussion. And if you want to be that first person who gets to share their thing, you go right ahead. This is the first time I'm going to take 10 seconds to be silent while you decide whether you want to do something. And I'm going to take off my jacket and stay a while. I'll be right back. I'll be right here, but okay, all warmed up. I've got several projects that got turned in before today, and so I'm going to go ahead and start opening up those projects and just see what I've got that I can share with you guys. So I'm going to use my screen share because I can, and show all the windows. Open up all the windows because they're all down here someplace. So, hey, here's one. Let's try this one first. Okay, so this happens, I'm screen sharing, yay. And hopefully you guys can hear me. So if you have any trouble with the audio, please let me know in the chat, or any private messages would be fine in the chat, and that would be great. And I'm trying to keep track of everybody who's in here now. So Jordan, Ezra, are you here? Okay. Rosalind, are you here? Who are all these damn people in the thing? I'm having a hard time keeping track of all you guys. Okay, so let's look at this composition. Now I'm going to just specify it's a vertical composition. That's great. We are looking for a variety of shapes working together in a compositional space. And I wanted you to do at least one amorphous shape. Amorphous means not morphous, or doesn't have a shape. Morph is a word that means shape, although a lot of you guys have grown up with the idea that morph is used as a verb to mean like changing shape or something like that. But originally it actually refers to shape. And so an amorphous shape, I think this is like a cloud of steam or something emanating from this structure right here, which to me, I don't know, sort of looks like a volcano. I'm not quite sure. If you guys are laughing at me at this point, you can go ahead and unmute your mics and tell me exactly what these shapes are supposed to be. But I'm seeing a relationship between these two shapes because they are overlapping or sharing an edge right here, which is really good. Those kinds of things create closer visual connections in the composition. And we want our shapes and elements in the composition to have close visual connections to help make for a strong composition. So we've got these two, and look, they're even contrasting colors, even though we're not talking about color at this point. Yes, they contrast, so I can definitely see that this is different than this. I'm a little bit concerned that this might be actually a foot shape here, because to me from the side it sort of looks like a foot too. So I'm not exactly sure if this is a biomorphic shape or something, but I'm not reading this orange shape as a geometric shape. So I'm thinking this is amorphous. Not exactly sure about this one. I'm definitely picking up on these two rectangles or squares here as geometric shapes. And then I see another shape that's kind of curving. It's green, although I'm not supposed to consider that. But it has the possibility of being a biomorphic shape, a shape that relates to biology, therefore biomorphic, because it looks like a kind of a green tentacle or possibly a little green worm. I'm thinking tentacle because it kind of tapers along its length, and then it has two sides that are kind of parallel to each other, even paralleling the curves on one side to another. So I'm thinking tentacle. And this tentacle kind of comes up from outside of the picture frame, the format frame, and touches on a tangent the box here. It might even be, you might even say that it's balancing it on a nose, on its nose, just like a circus performing seal or something like that, which I think is interesting. What do you guys think about these guys so far? I've kind of described some of the shapes in here. I'd like you guys to maybe describe what you see in terms of what's going on in the composition, in terms of how the shapes are, aligning with each other or touching each other, or if this part of the composition is doing something that is parallel to or relating to this part of the composition here, because we're interested in how the shapes relate to each other, and even if there are some eye movements that direct your eye through the compositions to try to create some kind of circulation or eye movement through the composition. Again, I'm going to stop talking for 10 seconds and see if anybody wants to venture in to the scariness of actually participating in the critique. Hey.
The green shape kind of resembles like a path almost to me. So it kind of creates like some depth to the square in the background there.
Yes. Yeah, through linear perspective, this could be seen as a path extending into the background, and the gray square kind of picks up on that idea because, and you guys of course don't know this yet, but things that are cool colors tend to recede in space, but also things that are not bright, not vivid colors, but somewhat dulled out colors or values tend to recede in space too. So a gray color might feel like it's receding further back into an imaginary three-dimensional space than this black color, which is in starker contrast to its white surroundings, and which is also attached to the baseline. So this might feel like it's a little bit more towards the front of the composition or advancing towards the viewer. Good observation, Alan. That's nice. Anybody else have any observations for this? Go ahead and unmute your mic and just, speak right up. I'm going to give us another little hand up here. I'm noticing these two shapes right here, the orange shape and the blue shape, are connected, and we've got a long shape emanating from or connected to a relatively short shape here. And then if you flip that concept upside down, we've got something similar happening with this long shape and this square here. So these two areas of the composition are doing kind of similar things, but flipped or different, and so it takes us all the way to the format frame edge up here at the top. This one takes us all the way down to the format frame edge at the bottom, and so that's kind of a really nice juxtaposition of those two kind of elements that are long and then attached to a more compact element, long and attached to a more compact element. Does anybody else see anything else in terms of alignment or how your eye moves through the composition, how you go from one element to the next, and how that might promote eye circulation through the composition?
I don't know. Am I allowed to critique this one because I made it?
You can critique this one. That's fine.
I feel like the blue thing was supposed to like get your eye to like go all the way down, and that this like the black square and like the green thing was supposed to bring your eye up. So I'm not.
Okay.
I'm not.
That's good. Okay. I got to tell you, your microphone is still kind of really gravelly, so it's difficult, but I know what you're talking about. So we're getting a directionality of ascending, of upward movement here, and we're getting a descending kind of movement here, which is really cool. You put the two of them together, and you start to get this kind of circulation through the composition. And if that weren't enough, you can also connect the dots here between these three elements to get all the way from one end to the other end. And it's a very quick then turnaround to kind of go up here. And even though there isn't really an element here, it's not that hard to kind of be contained within the format frame. And so your eye kind of moves all the way up and gets acquainted with this long blue element and then drops down again. So very good. Okay, that's excellent. I got to keep moving on because I spent a lot of time on this one. And so I'm going to, I wonder what happens when I hit the stop share button. Then I have to start, share screen again to go find another one. So I'm going to go find another one. Here's another one. Let's try this one. It'll be fun. Okay. So I hope you guys can see this one. Now, we don't necessarily have the format frame drawn on here, so we're going to have to use the edges of the actual Bristol board. you know, to help us kind of contain these elements and these images and stuff. But again, kind of from the general towards the specific, can you guys identify the biomorphic, geometric, and or amorphous forms? And you know, the amorphous form is going to be interesting because I think somebody is coloring outside the lines a little bit here with the collage concept. What do you guys think? Is this a unicorn up here flying across the thing? Wait a minute, unicorns don't have wings. This is some kind of a winged horse up here, I think. And it's probably supposed to be a biomorphic form, which is good. We've got a different kind of spacing of elements in this composition, but we do have at least 2 or 3 elements touching each other and or slightly overlapping, especially here in the middle of the composition. So we've got some very close visual linkages happening, especially between the elements that are close to each other or that are overlapping with each other. And then we've got some spacing, some negative spacing to some of the more far-flung images from the center. And perhaps the one that feels the farthest away is also this tiny image, which also feels like it may be way in the background, again, receding from the viewer into a more three-dimensional space in the background. Now, I do want to tell you something about human faces. We are humans and we are attracted to faces. We're kind of hardwired for that. So when you bring in a human face portrait into the composition, it becomes a focal point and your eye is immediately attracted to that. When it is a large shape, it dominates the composition. And so we're using one of the 7 principles of organization in a composition, dominance, with this very strong, very special kind of an image that is a human face. So the human face is probably a biomorphic shape. And this little flying horse up here is probably also a biomorphic shape. I'm very interested to hear what you guys have to think about these 2 shapes right here. I'm going to go way out on a limb and say that these are made out of fabric, actual, real fabric that has either been collaged into the collage or just draped onto the piece of paper and photographed for a collage, because I can't tell whether it's stuck on there or not. But do you think that these pieces of fabric, if they are indeed loose pieces of fabric and not something sampled from the magazine, whether they are our amorphous shapes or forms? Do you think they look amorphous?
I think they do look amorphous because I can't really tell like what they are just looking at the shape.
Yeah, I agree. And I would probably say that even though they have a smooth, a little bit more regular and well-defined edge, I can't tell either from the shape or from the texture. And you're really not supposed to consider texture in this idea of amorphous shape. We're supposed to just look at the outside shape itself, but we can't tell. So I think because of that, I'm going to assume that these are the amorphous shapes. And if the person who made this thing wants to chime in, that would be fantastic and fine, but you don't have to. But we're going to assume that maybe these 2 pieces, and I think they are fabric. I don't think they are sampled paper from the magazine. So I really like the close proximity. I like that they overlap, and especially like that they overlap slightly on the cheek and kind of follow this contour. This becomes a really closely well-defined super shape of compositional elements. I get a little bit more concerned with these squares out here because they're kind of floating on their own. For me, I'd like them to maybe approach closer to either one of these shapes, overlapping would help. Maybe if they were overlapping another thing in here, like a line or something else, to kind of help connect them up a little bit more. But I can now see that if I, kind of circle the wagons and jump from the 3 outer elements and kind of orbit the central inner elements, that we definitely are promoting a sense of eye movement through the composition this way. And that's pretty good. Anybody else have anything that you are seeing that I'm not seeing that you'd like to comment on? Okay, I'm going to go to the next one here to keep this party going, because that's what we do. That was from the morning class. That was from the morning class. We haven't done this one yet, so let's try this one and see what happens. All righty then. Let's see, can I move this? You guys can't even see it, so I'm gonna, that's my chat thing. I'm gonna minimize the chat. I've got this maxed out in terms of size as much as I can, so I can't show it any bigger. Okay, so we've got the format frame drawn on here and established on our Bristol board. And so we want to kind of go around and take inventory of the shapes and decide, whether are they geometric, biomorphic, or amorphous, and see how they are relating to each other. And this is interesting because there are some, ways that these things are relating to each other. And I'd like you guys to try to point them out. Adriel, are you still there?
Yes.
Okay.
This top image up here with like the furry hat thing and the person, I think that's their biomorphic and amorphous shape. I actually had the same shape cut out and almost used it, but I like that they combined both of them there.
Good observation. Okay, yes. It's also the most complex shape in terms of textures, and that's not a shape thing, but in terms of contours, in terms of image, and so it also becomes a focal point in the composition. It draws your eye to it. This poor person is wearing a sheep on her head. Okay. Anybody else notice anything else about the triangles or the rectangles or the very sharp curving pieces that are kind of like almond shapes?
I think the triangles being in front of the frame really create like a illusion of like being in front, giving a good dimension to the to the composition and stuff. So
that's good. That's fantastic. Yeah, anything that overlaps another thing wants to be in front, and of course they're overlapping what is our pictorial space, our compositional space, so they really want to jump out in front. So that's nice. That's good. I also noticed that they are mirror images of each other and flipped images of each other, which is kind of interesting. So, the long sides are parallel to the edges of the format frame and to the outside of the Bristol board. And the inside, the hypotenuse of each triangle is flipped towards the inside. So they kind of bracket what's going on in the interior space. And then how do they relate, or how do the other elements, are they relating in terms of their placement, in terms of how they are spaced with other things in the composition? Do you think this person likes balance?
I think it has like a pretty neat balance of like symmetry and asymmetry. Like with the trick, like with the person with the sheep on their head, like there's not like a lot of symmetry going on, but like with like the shapes all around it, they present like a nice balance of that.
Very good. Okay. I'm seeing, interesting diagonal balances between these two almond shapes here. This almond shape flipped on its side, kind of wants to do something that's similar to what's going on with this big furry shape up on top of her head here. And of course, these two rectangles, because they're gray and because they're smaller, are taking like a secondary role in the composition, but they're also placed in a way that they balance each other out in the composition. So we've got this square that is right smack dab in the middle of the whole compositional space. And so you get, you get a lot of things that are equally distant from each other, balancing each other out in the composition. Some would refer to this as radial balance, because if you've got a point right here and you radiate out from that point, you've got things that are balancing each other out, kind of radially all the way around the composition, which is kind of cool. If I had to be just a teeny tiny little bit critical, I might say, please try to overlap more things, because every time things overlap, it becomes more interesting and we're creating more visual linkages in the composition. So the triangles are overlapping the lines, and so that kind of makes a stronger visual connection. The square is overlapping this human head with the big furry thing on top, which makes a really strong visual connection. Even where these little tiny little fingers are coming over and touching on a tangent, this little rectangle over here, that makes a stronger visual connection than just proximity. When things are close, they're close, but they're no cigar, even though these things kind of look like a cigar. So, sometimes touching or overlapping, can make even stronger visual connections in a composition. But very good. Thank you for doing it. Thank you for getting it in before the due date. And, that's wonderful. I'm going to do the stop share again, go back to my share screen, try to find one more piece that hasn't gotten talked about yet. Oh, is this one? Well, let's see. I can't remember now. Oh my gosh, it is one. So from the general towards the specific, you guys can just go ahead and jump in. What do you see? Can you find the amorphous forms? Can you find the geometric or biomorphic forms? And can you comment on how things are holding together visually in the composition? And it might take a moment, because it takes a little time for this to kind of for you to read this and kind of understand how things are relating to each other. And then you have to form an opinion. And then you have to say the opinion. And those things all take a little bit of time. So this is me showing all kinds of restraint here, not trying to talk too much. But sometimes I look for the biomorphic forms, and then I might see biomorphic form in the face and in this foot or this leg over here. And so I've identified the biomorphic forms. And I'm also going to say, okay, how are they situated and how are they oriented in space? Well, the face is kind of vertical here, and this leg is kind of vertical here. And hey, that's kind of interesting. They're sort of going in the same direction, even if they're not totally lined up with each other. So these two things have they share kind of a certain way that they're in space in the composition. And then I see some other things that are either parallel to each other or next to each other that are kind of similarly sharing space in the composition. I was wondering if you guys could start to see those similarities and if you could point them out too. So I think that this thing that's kind of working as a hat on top of her head, I think this has been a sampled out cloud from the sky. And it was really difficult to actually cut around the edges of the cloud And then if you cut around the edges of the cloud, you wind up with a white cloud on a white background, which you can't see. So I can appreciate what has happened here. We have a little bit of the blue sky and a little bit of black behind it, just to give enough contrast to the edge of the shape so that we can actually see the shape. But I think this cloud is supposed to be an amorphous shape. And do you see any other amorphous shape in here that's kind of similarly handled in this composition? How about, I think this thing over here that's coming from behind the model's head, and it's kind of an upside down version of this thing. The clues I'm getting visually are that it's also got a blue background and possibly a gray-white cloud in the center of it. So I think this might also want to be an amorphous form. And so I'm noticing that this amorphous form and this amorphous form are somewhat horizontal in the composition. They are longer this way than they are in the vertical format. And this one is long. This one is kind of angling up slightly. This is angling down slightly, but they're sort of both horizontal, similarly sized, and kind of parallel to each other. So I get that. I understand that. That makes some sense to me. I'm also seeing a whole bunch of geometric forms in here. Can you guys comment on the geometric forms? A lot of the geometric forms are coming in pairs. So identify the pair, and we'll talk about how pairs work in terms of repetition of form in the composition. I know you think I'm crazy. I'm seeing these two red triangles here, and they're a pair of red triangles. They're similar in size, and I like the fact that they're even pointing at each other. Sometimes we like to follow with our eyes visually a point because it becomes like an arrowhead, and so this one's pointing to the left, and this one is pointing to the right, or vice versa, and we get this very tantalizing little space in between the two of them that's almost like a spark plug gap where, you know, the spark of energy will jump between these two things. So this is really kind of cool with a little energized space in between. I'm also picking up on these smaller rectangles that are green in shape, and they're kind of fun. They're vertical. They kind of lead the eye up through the composition this way, which is fun. There are two larger rectangles that don't relate to each other initially when you first look at them, but they're still rectangles. How about, can you guys talk about those two rectangles and how they relate to each other? All right, I'm seeing the rectangle that is the vogue word in it. It is inside of a white rectangle. It's about that shape. We've got the green rectangle down here that the foot is standing on. And so these two rectangles for me are kind of connected by the foot, because the foot is like overlapping both of them and connecting them. They're also parallel to each other, sort of horizontal in this vertical composition. And so we've got these two similarly sized rectangles that are kind of doing a similar kind of a thing. And so formally, we've got those rectangles here. When I go back overall with the composition, I see this horizontal shape that's a cloud. That's the amorphous shape on the head. Another amorphous cloud over here. Another big rectangle here and another big rectangle down here. So I see at least four large horizontal elements in the composition that kind of give some really nice visual stepping stones throughout the composition. that kind of, it's a really nice kind of repetition of form, sort of, the two clouds and the two rectangles. And then we've got these other two pairs of things that are more minimal, the triangles and the green things here. But that provides a repetition of form. And so we kind of get lots of rhythm and repetition going on in here. We've also got, you know, your eye kind of connects the dots and moves up this way, swings over the top of the hat, and then kind of connects the dots and comes back down along the length of this leg here. And that helps us to create eye movement in the composition. So we get eye movement, eye circulation through the composition. And it kind of is all in an orbit around her face, which is kind of a, you know, focal point in the composition. Although the word Vogue is a real strong focal point in the composition. It's almost got more detail, more contrast. And even though we are attracted to human faces, it's really hard to, you know, to ignore the one area of the composition that is all letters in red, contrasting with a white background. So, you know, maybe the strongest focal point in the composition is actually the rectangle that contains the word Vogue in it. Okay, this was difficult. This was hard, and I know that maybe a lot of you aren't either art majors or design majors, or you're not used to, you know, talking and holding forth in front of other people. But I want you to know and to be, well, I want you to know that, you know, I'm here to support us all in these critiques, and I'm always happy to rush in and try to paraphrase what you're saying and maybe help it along a little bit in terms of filling in the gaps or say, trying to use the terms and vocabulary words and stuff to make sure that we're, you know, staying on track with the critique. And I do appreciate you trying and you know, being courageous in trying to take part in the oral critique. I'm going to call it a day for today. Next time, I'm going to start rolling out the next project about value. So between now and then, I want you to try to finish up reading the chapter on shape, chapter 4, dealing with shape. And then chapter 5 is going to be dealing with value. And value is kind of a little weird thing. So it's going to take us a little longer to do a value project. Between learning how to do value and learning how to draw and experiment with mark making with doing values, and then trying to actually teach ourselves how to do a drawing next week. This is going to be a 2-week project. So I do want us to think seriously about doing a self-portrait project. If you guys can take some selfies or look at your, you know, graduation pictures or whatever is a really cool picture of you that you like, that you might like to do as the basis of a drawing, that would be great. Logan is here. Yes, sir.
I just wanted to give you a heads up, Mr. Fritz. I'm not gonna make Friday's session as I work that day, and you know.
Okay, that's good. Try to get caught up with it, looking at the recordings, because I now have the recordings visible for you guys in the e-learning area under the Zoom, YouTube recordings. So you'll be able to get caught up on that. So until Friday, I want to thank you guys for coming today. Get the rest of you, try to get your projects done and in by tonight so that I can look them over. And I'll see you guys again on Friday afternoon. So,
Mr. Fritz.
yes, what's up?
No, say bye.
You say goodbye. So goodbye to everybody. And thank you so much for coming today.